At Sierra, discover great deals on top brand workout gear, like high-quality walking shoes, which might lead to another discovery.
40,000 steps, baby. Who's on top now, Karen?
You've taken the office step challenge a step too far. Don't worry, though. Sierra also has yoga gear. It might be a good place to find your zen. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
This message is brought to you by Apple Card. Apple Card takes privacy seriously. It's your card, your info, your business. So if your credit card isn't Apple Card, maybe it should be. Subject to credit approval. Apple Card issued by Goldman Sachs Bank USA Salt Lake City branch. Terms and more at applecard.com.
It's Monday, August 25th, 2025, the last week before Labor Day, if not technically of summer. Football back very shortly. Welcome back to Hang Up and Listen, the sports podcast here at Slate. Back with you again, I'm Alex Kirshner. I'm a contributing writer here at Slate, and I co-host Split Zone Duo, a national college football podcast. This week, we will discuss the launch of a watershed product in sports media, albeit one that is pretty confusing and may not do the thing that lots of media and market analysts once thought it would. That's ESPN's direct-to-consumer streaming app, which probably will not kill cable. The writer Louisa Thomas of The New Yorker will join us to talk about a new innovation at this year's U.S. Open, a revamped mixed doubles format, which had a lot of people excited last week, but also some people mad. And we'll talk about the Indianapolis Colts once again sending 2023's number 4 overall draft pick Anthony Richardson to the bench. It's indicative of a crisis, we think, in NFL quarterback development and the continuation of a trend long in the making around the league. We'll talk about it. As usual, joining me this week is Lindsay Gibbs, the publisher of Power Plays, a newsletter that covers the biggest stories of the day in women's sports. But Lindsay, I know that over the weekend, you were positively chuffed, as was I, to see Tommy Fleetwood finally win a PGA Tour event. And not just any, but the Tour Championship.
He did it! I love seeing players get those proverbial monkeys off their back. I mean, one of the biggest narratives of this PGA Tour season was Tommy Fleetwood meltdowns kind of on the final days and bad luck and inability to get across the finish line. So to see him in the final PGA event of the year, win the $10 million prize, take home the trophy, that was good stuff. That was a fun story.
Yeah, between Rory winning the Masters and Tommy winning this tournament, it's been a big year for UK golfers finally getting over the hump. So that was nice. It was his 164th career start on the PGA Tour, and he had 30 top 5 finishes without a victory, the most in the past century. A couple close calls earlier this year. He had won $33 million, which was the most for a golfer who had not won. I mean, in a way, he won because he won $33 million, which I would take that too. But still, finally got the victory. So congrats to him. And hey, congrats to us, because this week is our 1-year anniversary as Hang Up hosts. So it has been a treat getting to work with you two, and I'm honored that we have been able to carry on the legacy of this fine podcast.
It has been an absolute joy to walk in the footsteps of many great podcasters before us here at Hang Up and Listen. I've had a lot of fun, and time sneaks up on you when you're doing something every Monday. I don't know if we've missed a Monday. We might not have done Labor Day week last year.
Yeah, I think we missed 1 week.
I think so. I think we've done 51 in 52 weeks. We'll see if we can make it a perfect 52 out of 52. Although it's actually a great point that we bring this up, Ben. Next week's Hang Up and Listen will be coming to you on Tuesday. We will not be doing a Labor Day Monday recording. So be on the lookout next week on Tuesday for an additional episode of this podcast. Ben, I didn't even introduce you, but you're Ben Lindbergh.
Yes, I am. I said hello before you could introduce me, but we've been here for a year, so people probably knew.
It's true. Maybe we could dial back the introductions as we go forward. Before we get into our business this week, we do want to say thank you on this 1-year anniversary for us to our Slate Plus members whose continued support makes our bosses want to keep us in these chairs. Subscribing helps us make the show, of course. It allows you to get it ad-free, a great perk, and you get bonus segments. And there is good news. We have one of those live right now for Slate Plus members. It's about the new best team in the WNBA, and perhaps the best player in the WNBA too, Napheesa Collier, though she has been injured of late. Ahead of the playoffs, we will check up on Collier and the Lynx and everything that's going on with Minnesota's elite WNBA team. You can hear that episode right now, as long as you're a Slate Plus member. Subscribe by going to Apple Podcasts and clicking Try Free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/hangupplus to get access wherever you listen. For several years now, ESPN has been planning for a moment that arrived last Thursday. Until then, the worldwide leader had only ever been available via a cable subscription or a similar online pay TV bundle like YouTube TV. The biggest player in sports media has experimented with some direct-to-consumer stuff and already had a limited streamer with some bonusy content called ESPN Plus. But the launch of a full-on direct-to-consumer product was supposed to have drastic consequences for cable, which has lost something like 40% of its subscribers in the past 15 years. ESPN gets closer to a move that will kill cable. Wall Street publication The Street wrote after Disney, ESPN's parent, made this plan public a couple of years ago. It doesn't seem like that's happening, though. At a price of $30 a month, ESPN DTC costs about twice what the average cable provider pays just for ESPN, a fee it passes along to those of us subscribing to the pay TV bundle. It's designed to be an expensive product, this new thing is, in part so that it doesn't drive cable companies out of business. ESPN has said that it's focused on people who don't already have cable or never did. And given that ESPN is charging $30 for this thing, and it only collects about half that in carriage fees per subscriber, why is ESPN being so careful about not killing cable? Well, because that's still how it makes around $1 billion a month before it even sells a commercial. It turns out that the cable bundle was a pretty nice idea. It forces carriers to make ESPN available in standard plans if they want to get it at all, and that means that even tens of millions of non-sports fans are stuck paying that $15 a month for ESPN on cable. ESPN really doesn't want to get rid of that. So, Ben, put on your media analyst hat for a moment. Do you think ESPN can walk this line, this new direct-to-consumer product that it wants you to get but doesn't really want you to get for a while?
Yeah, my media analyst hat is just one of those old-timey fedora-style hats with a press paper stuck in the front. I do think it can walk this line for the foreseeable future, but also I don't think we can foresee very far into the future, as some of those headlines from a couple of years ago you read indicate. Just this hedge that they're making here probably won't work forever, but maybe it will work long enough. They're trying to have it both ways as long as they can, because ESPN's down from a high of about 100 million subscribers to 60 million or so. So Rob Manfred, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, called it a shrinking platform, which it is, but it's still a large one, and they're trying to prop it up as long as possible. And maybe they'll have some success in doing that because cord cutting has slowed. It hasn't stopped, but it has slowed at least. And some people thought, well, the pace would just accelerate, if anything, and we would just drop to 0 people subscribing to cable. That doesn't seem to be the case. There will just continue to be some slippage, but I think there is a contingent of cable subscribers who are just locked in for life, essentially. You might just have a large portion of that captive audience until, frankly, a lot of committed cable subscribers die. I mean, apologies for being a bit morbid about it, but if you came up with cable and you're just unwilling to subscribe to 7 different streaming services, then you might just ride or die and die with cable. I don't know how many new cable subscribers are really being created at this point. So you're just trying to retain that pie or your slice of that pie for as long as possible, because it really was a good deal for ESPN that's unlikely to be repeated. And also a good deal for people who religiously watched ESPN. That's the thing. Like, our watching of sports was subsidized by the subscription fees for people who didn't watch sports, but were just forced to pay for that anyway to get the channels that they wanted to watch. And so ESPN made bank because they got the revenue from the sports watchers and the non-sports watchers. And then the sports watchers basically paid half price, at least if you look at what it would cost now compared to what it would cost to subscribe to this ESPN direct-to-consumer venture. So in a way, we both had it good, I guess, for a while, and other people had it very bad, but either were unaware of that or were just willing to put up with it because it just kind of came with the territory. So they're just doing what they can here between this service and just snapping up as many rights to sports games as they possibly can, because that's what ESPN is all about now. It's not so much about the commentary for sporting events. I mean, there are just fewer shows on ESPN now during the day, just fewer sports talk shows, sports shouting shows. It's now really, they have put all of their eggs in the basket of a few faces, your Pat McAfee's and your Stephen A's, and then just rights for as many things that they can pay for so that we have no choice but to subscribe to ESPN one way or another. And for now, that's working.
I just think this is all getting so confusing. The amount of names that things have, the amount of different tiers. I do not know often what I am subscribed to and what I'm not subscribed to. And that's not just because I'm terrible at keeping track of my subscription and renewals and everything. But look, I think overall, this is a smart play from ESPN. This is more about the future than it is the present, I think. But that's where you have to be thinking when you are, the helm of one of these networks, especially in an industry that is as ever changing as media and sports media in particular and broadcasting. But yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of time wondering, what does this kind of mean for me? I do have cable. A cable subscription comes with the condo that I live in. So, it's part of the whole deal. So it just makes sense for me to have Spectrum because we get a drastically reduced price. And yet I then, because I love sports and especially women's sports, have subscriptions to Paramount Plus for NWSL. I have subscriptions to ESPN Plus for their extra content. I have subscriptions to Peacock for their Olympics coverage, and of course, things like WNBA League Pass. You just keep adding on the things that you have in order to see all these different sports on all these different platforms. And there's this pressure these days, which didn't always exist, that you can technically have access to everything, so you must have access to everything. Do you know what I mean? Like, it used to be you wouldn't even dream of watching all these things, but now it's like, well, I feel the pressure to, because it's a possibility for not that much more money a month, but it adds up. So, I think I'm a little bit more interested in whether or not there is this kind of seamless integration with the cable subscribers. I know they're still trying to work out a deal with YouTube TV, which sounds like pretty significant snag to me, but we'll see if that ends up being the case. I was able to easily sign in with my Spectrum account, and I get access to, it seems like, the full slate of things that I used to get access to, plus a little bit more. I mean, I'm going to be paying attention to the aspects of this ESPN Unlimited thing that are kind of meant to keep you in the app. There's a lot more. If it says if you're watching the game on an app, you can squeeze back video to reveal access stats, key plays, fantasy info. And there's going to, of course, be ESPN Bet integration, and a shop tab in partnership with Fanatics, of course. There's going to be a section called Verts, which is a TikTok-ish vertical video product that will feature user highlights, viral clips, and social content. There will be a Sports Center for You, which is an AI-powered highlights personalized to individual fans, which very curious about. I don't know. And then I think the thing I'm most excited about is just what I've been begging for, which is a multi-view option when watching live games through the ESPN app. Just like, couldn't you just have done that years ago instead of just waiting for all this other stuff to come with it? But, I think, Alex, you're right. Like, there's a fine line here between not biting the hand that fed you, which is this cable bundle, versus trying to be on the forefront of where things are going.
I think in the interim, the fascinating thing to watch about ESPN's relationship with its cable distributors is that a lot of them are clearly pissed about this. If you read the industry press, even though ESPN has priced this thing in a way that is not supposed to drive cable out of business, they're not happy because the cable providers are kind of the ones who brung ESPN to the dance, if you will, over all of these years. But also ESPN does this not every year, but many years. And I think everyone will remember a lot of these fights. ESPN likes to throw its weight around and really use leverage against the cable providers. You know, the expense of live sports rights has exploded and ESPN pays that. And so in 2010, the average cable fee for a subscriber for ESPN, we would pay our cable companies about $4 per house to get ESPN. And now it's more like $15. And that's because ESPN has continued to get more and more expensive inventory. The cable companies don't want to charge all of that to their customers. But ESPN does this thing that's pretty genius from their perspective, which is they don't allow cable providers. This is an ironclad rule of theirs. They don't allow them to offer a sports-free tier that would allow your sports ball people who really don't care at all about anything to do with ESPN to pay less for cable and not get it. So, you know, if you have cable, you're paying for ESPN whether you want it or not. And ESPN maintains this leverage in a lot of ways. In a lot of other ways, you know, their deals tend to come up basically right about now, right before the football season starts. Oftentimes, sometimes taking it to literally hours before like the first Monday Night Football games of the year, because they know that a lot of cable customers are going to be very upset with Charter or Comcast or whoever if they don't have ESPN. And I think the thing that ESPN is worried about is if all the sports fans go to the direct-to-consumer thing, and that leaves only people who don't care about sports in the cable bundle, then the cable companies can say, no, we're not going to follow these rules anymore. You need to let us offer a sports-free tier to some of our subscribers. And then ESPN loses the $15 a month from the millions, tens of millions even, of people who just don't care. They get to stop taxing every household that has cable. And that would be a substantial loss.
Yeah. And in the meantime, they're also competing with the tech titans who are in streaming and who are bidding to snap up rights, Netflix, Prime Video, etc. And so that's why ESPN keeps trying to sweeten the deal here and is making moves. We talked about, of course, the partnership and ownership stake the NFL now has in ESPN a few weeks back, but there's also an investment in WWE pay-per-view events, which will be exclusive to ESPN's direct-to-consumer offering. And then there's an MLB agreement in the offing here. The details still trickling out, but it seems like ESPN might just sort of swallow MLB TV, at least in the short term. And a lot of these things, I mean, there will be bundles and there will be discounts and there will be ways to get access to this without paying full freight potentially. But then once certain things are behind the ESPN paywall, that's something that a lot of MLB TV subscribers are worried about. Now, do I have to pay the same price that I already pay for MLB TV on top of the $30 a month for this ESPN service?
Yeah. Do I, Ben? Do I? This could
Probably,
be the thing that finally
right?
gets me to break up with the Pirates. I would love that.
That might be healthy for you if it forces you to take that step. But for a lot of people who have better relationships with their better baseball teams, that would be a bigger hit to the checkbook. So Lindsay alluded to this earlier. We fret about all of this, and there are things to fret about, but we are somewhat spoiled by having the option to access all of these sporting events that in the past would have been accessible only by attending them in person, which would not have been feasible for non-sports media members. So in a way, we have it good, even though everything always seems bad. And there are legitimate concerns for an industry that flourished on the back of what may prove to have been a pretty temporary arrangement. We've talked about this in the context of baseball and other sports also with their broadcast contracts and whether there's a bubble there just because, again, there's that sort of subsidizing aspect going on. And if you're asking fans of teams to subscribe to get access to those games directly, there aren't going to be as many of them, or you're going to have to charge them just hand over fist to get the same amount of revenue from the committed fans who are actually your audience that you were getting from them. And then also the sea of people who couldn't have cared less, but were still paying for your thing, whether they knew it or not. So that's where we are now. And this is sort of a bold bid, I guess, to try to have the cake and eat it too, or at least to preserve the cake or the pie or make the various pastries last as long as possible.
I did laugh, though, at some of the things that ESPN was apparently doing to alert and educate viewers about this new service that they are providing. One included, of course, the best way to reach the average sports consumer, ringing a bell last Thursday morning at the New York Stock Exchange. Also a series of ads featuring John Cena. Get that. But this one, I'm surprised I've not seen clips of this on social media. I'm wondering if this has actually happened, or if New Yorkers are just so jaded that they did not even notice. But there was apparently a takeover of the New York City subway's E train, E for ESPN. Not only signage on the inside and outside of the trains, but the voice of Stephen A. Smith on the PA system. Can you imagine anything worse on your morning commute than it being Stephen A. Smith on the PA system telling you to mind the gap and watch for closing doors?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
The good news is that the PA system in the subway is often unintelligible anyway, so you might not be able to make it out.
That's true. But, Ben, we might need you to do some on-the-scene reporting for
us.
Yes. Find the E-train and let us know if it has been Stephen A. Smithified.
I'll search for the E-train. But okay. Yeah, the branding also, it seems confusing that it's just called ESPN because we're used to ESPN Plus and everything is always plus when it's a streaming service. And now it's just ESPN, which makes it very difficult to distinguish between streaming ESPN and cable ESPN, ESPN proper, which is why we keep calling it direct-to-consumer offering or something sort of awkward like that. And there's always this kind of back and forth and push and pull. And we saw it obviously with Max, which was HBO Max, and then it was Max, and then it went back to HBO Max. And that was roundly mocked at every turn. Because if you have a good brand that people like and recognize like HBO, why would you want to minimize that? ESPN now is not doing that, obviously is not minimizing the ESPN, but it's just sort of the same name, which also is confusing. But maybe in the long run, that speaks to their ambitions, where this isn't just the streaming arm of ESPN. It's ESPN. It's just as legitimately ESPN as any other way of getting ESPN. And maybe long term, it's the default, or longer term, it's the exclusive way to get ESPN. So I suppose they're preparing people for that reality now.
Pray for the PR execs who have to explain this to news media and audiences.
The expensive consultants who advise one name change and then advise a change back to the original change.
Yes, we root for them. Up next, we'll talk about mixed doubles at the U.S. Open, which got a little bit more than a fresh coat of paint this year.
This message is brought to you by Apple Card. Did you know Apple Card is designed to help you pay off your balance faster with smart payment suggestions? And because fees don't help you, Apple Card doesn't have any. So if your credit card isn't Apple Card, maybe it should be. Subject to credit approval. Apple Card issued by Goldman Sachs Bank USA Salt Lake City branch. Variable APRs range from 18.24% to 28.49% based on creditworthiness. Rates as of July 1st, 2025. Terms and more at applecard.com.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Checking off the boxes on your to-do list is a great feeling. And when it comes to checking off coverage, a State Farm agent can help you choose an option that's right for you. Whether you prefer talking in person, on the phone, or using the award-winning app, it's nice knowing you have help finding coverage that best fits your needs. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
The U.S. Open starts in earnest this week with most of the matches that you would normally consider part of a Grand Slam. But last week was also sort of the U.S. Open, a bit of a ramp-up week for the championship. And it featured an event unlike what you would see in most Grand Slams of the day. It was mixed doubles with one man and one woman per team playing up to 4 matches over 2 days. And of course, mixed doubles have been around for a long time, but the U.S. Open redesigned them this year. There was a format cut from 32 teams to 16 with a new selection process designed to get the most famous players into the field, even if they weren't ranked highly. For example, Venus Williams, who didn't get out of the first round with partner Riley Opelka, but still showed up on my Instagram Reels, was part of the event, and it drew a lot of buzz that she was there. Prize money was quintupled to $1 million to add some stakes, and the whole thing felt like kind of a big deal. And the ultimate evidence, I suppose, is that we're talking about it now on Hang Up and Listen. Our guest now is Louisa Thomas, a staff writer at The New Yorker, who last week published an interesting piece, The Hyped Revival of Mixed Doubles. It came out about 2 days before the event. Louisa, thanks for coming on the show. And what I want to ask is, did the event feel as big as it was actually being contested as the pre-tournament hype that you wrote about indicated it would?
Always happy to come on and give the Hang Up and Listen verdict on whether this is a real thing or not. You know what? I have to say that I think that the outcome was the best possible version of the event. And it did live up to the hype. The question is, what was the hype for? What does it mean? I think that is still an open question. People clearly loved the event. The stands were packed. The crowds were loud. The players were having fun, and the tennis was quite good. I think what redeemed the event for me somewhat is that the only pair of doubles specialists in the field won and looked incredible doing it. But I think that, it was a fun event. I did think it was going to be a big fun event going in. That wasn't the question. The question was this a good idea for the tournament, not just for the level of buzz?
Yeah, you wrote about this in your piece, how this kind of flew in the face of a lot of trends in tennis. And I was thinking about this over the weekend when the Bryan brothers, Bob and Mike, were inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame, the twin team, the most successful doubles pairing of all time. And that was possibly overshadowed by the fact that they went in alongside Maria Sharapova, who is probably a bigger star for most casual fans of tennis. So how did tennis become so singles-centric over time? And then how did doubles become mainly single sex?
Well, Maria Sharapova wasn't just inducted into the Hall of Fame, but she was introduced by Serena Williams.
Yeah.
Which was...
I'm still reeling.
Incredible content. But I also think that part of the answer to that question, your question, is in that moment. Part of this has to do with the star power of a few absolutely magnetic individuals. There's some irony. Serena Williams herself won 2 mixed doubles Grand Slams before she ever won a singles, and is an excellent doubles player with a long kind of doubles pedigree. But she is certainly known as a singles player. Maybe pair with Venus, and they're sort of known as a doubles team. But really, she is first and foremost a singles player. And we have been exiting an era in which a few players have really kind of dominated the conversation and have become these kind of larger than sport cultural figures. And I think that has a huge part to do with it. I think the money has a huge part to do with it, because the financial incentives for winning doubles matches just don't stack up to winning singles matches. So what you will see sometimes is that top players will enter the draw in doubles, but once they go deeper into the tournament, they'll withdraw. And that's not only understandable, that's wise. That's what people are buying tickets to see. They're not buying tickets to see them, win a quarterfinal doubles match. They're buying tickets to watch them on, Arthur Ashe Stadium at 7 p.m. In the singles draw. So I think that part of that has to do with that. Part of it has to do with the game is, a huge storyline coming to the U.S. Open on the tennis circuit as a whole is the sort of length of the season and the demands put on these players' bodies as these tournaments kind of stretch out and out. And the season stretches on and on. It doesn't sometimes make sense to double up if, you're trying to prioritize your health. I mean, there are myriad reasons, but especially on the men's side, they play best out of 3, which instead of 2 out of 3, again, you are asking a lot out of yourself in those matches. Are you really going to play 2 matches in one day? So I think that has a lot to do with it. But a lot of it is just the sort of marquee star power of a few players who have become associated with the game who really have focused on singles, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, it reminds me a little bit of I was kind of talking with a friend about the All-Star game, how the players, there's so much money on the line in the regular season, right? That like in the NBA, you're no longer excited to compete in the dunk contest or go hard at the All-Star game because the risk of injuring themselves, like you risk way too much for the regular season, right? Which as the money goes up, the stakes just get higher and higher. And we've seen singles prize money just skyrocket, whereas doubles prize money really hasn't. And I think even though singles prize money has always been more, I think it really does add to the calculus of what you're prioritizing in the game. But, you mentioned how it was Sara Errani and Andrea Valvasori who won the U.S. Open mixed doubles last year and were quite outspoken when this event was first announced as being reimagined. Of course, usually mixed doubles takes place during the regular Grand Slam tournament. Over the course, the final is around the finals weekend where you're seeing the men's final, women's final, men's doubles, women's doubles, champions all being ranged. It's a part of it, but it's fifth on the totem pole often in those, in that hierarchy. So, they were really upset about the way that this was being reimagined. But in the end, like you said, they ended up getting, $200,000 for winning last year. They got $1 million for winning this year. They did not play in front of a sold out Ash crowd last year. They did this year in prime time. I'll be honest. I'm a big tennis fan. I do not remember watching the mixed doubles, championship last year. I was glued to this one this year. I thought a lot of things worked really well, including the kind of fast four format, the sets only going to 4 instead of 6, which I didn't think I'd like, which I ended up liking and missing even when they took that away in the championship match. What do you think it says that this kind of was a commercial success? And what does it say maybe about the way that, has this been like kind of an untapped resource for so long? Is this something we could see other tournaments start to do?
I think it absolutely is. And there are a couple questions in that question, and I think you can sort of untangle them. It's definitely an untapped resource. There have been a few events, the United Cup, for instance, which emphasize mixed doubles. The Olympics, doubles is plays a part of the tournament that it doesn't at other events. And you will find Rafael Nadal and Carlos Alcaraz, playing and losing, I should say. It's a doubles specialist. I think that what was striking was that for me, I did not watch the mixed doubles last year. So it does seem somewhat hypocritical for me to say this was such a terrible idea. And here I was, transfixed by this event. On the other hand, I don't think that whether or not I watched, I write for the New Yorker. There is poetry in the New Yorker. A lot of people are not subscribing to the New Yorker to read the poetry, but something would be lost if it was gone. I think that part of tennis's gift is its variation and its variability and the ways in which the players learn something about the game. I mean, one of the reasons I found this event so much fun was watching this long-limbed Valvasori up at net with this kind of he was like a raptor. I mean, he was just such a fearsome force. I mean, he's not a top singles player, and Sara Errani, who's throwing these puffball serves that these guys could not were just hitting the back fence with. They had no idea what to do with. I mean, they just introduced this kind of question of strategy and, this idea that you can't just walk up. Iga Swiatek played really well, but you still cannot walk up to this tournament and just win because you are better, in an individual sense. And I thought that was really fun. And I think that the way that this version of the tournament succeeds going forward is that it does allow for more doubles players in the draw. There's a way to integrate the big names while also leaving more spaces for doubles specialists, different ways to do it. You could do 8 pairs of singles players, 8 pairs of doubles players, let them face off. You could combine singles and doubles rankings. This year they actually weighted singles rankings and not doubles rankings. You could sort of let people choose their rankings or whatever. I mean, there's tons of ways to do it, but I think that would make it a more compelling draw. And I think that also, hopefully, some of the singles players who had fun with this event walk away saying, we can't just, kind of introduce ourselves to each other, the week before the event and expect to win it. We're going to actually have to practice and prepare and maybe become become doubles players in some respect, or become doubles players together, because like any team sport, chemistry matters. Even two very good doubles players can't just like walk onto a court and expect to know each other's tendencies. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in this format. But I think that the way it was sort of presented as a sort of like, this is broken and the answer is let's just draw the most attention possible is kind of, and this is also a personality thing. Like I kind of am repelled by the attention economy. So part of it's that. But I think that there's something to this. I just think that they didn't figure it out on the first try. And I'm hoping that they take the opportunity to, and also the lesson that the great Iranian story taught them, to sort of rejigger the event, and that hopefully other events follow suit. The calendar is so jam-packed, it's hard to imagine some of the other tournaments. I mean, Tennis Australia is the organization that does the most kind of inventiveness, but they actually have a stake in a lot of the tournaments in the run-up to the Australian Open. So it's hard to imagine them eating one of their tournaments in order to do this. Or, I mean, there's always something, right? So the question is, where does this go from here? And I hope it goes somewhere good. I'm not betting on it. I'm not counting on it, but there's definitely a pathway to it.
Yeah, I hope this continues because I want an answer to that question of which matters more, just the pure talent or the chemistry and experience playing together, because Swiatek and Casper Ruud accomplished singles players, but had never played together before this week. And so you got to think that that would take a toll, even though they did make the final. So small sample, but I want a larger sample so that we can begin to answer that question. And there was a BBC story that said that the other three Grand Slam tournaments are, quote, thought unlikely to follow suit in the near future because Tennis Australia, which you mentioned, doesn't have as much money as the USTA. And then the French Open and Wimbledon are more traditional and might be less willing to embrace this. So I guess if it remains a US Open only thing, that's good branding for this event. It becomes just a big annual draw, but it seems like given the response to this, someone will want to copy it.
I think it's interesting to see tennis going through the same competitive integrity versus popcorn dynamic that every sport nowadays is dealing with regards to its competition format. And I mean pretty much every sport. Like this weekend, we talked about it in the opening, the Tour Championship of the PGA Tour. They want it to be an interesting tournament, so they no longer give the number one player a strokes advantage going in, which means that Scottie Scheffler, even though he was the best player all year, didn't win the PGA Tour title this year. And it strikes me that tennis, more than most sports, was probably a bit immune to this for a long time, because what are you going to do? Are you going to make every leg of the bracket like best 2 out of 3, not sets? I mean, like literally matches. Like, are you gonna add dozens and dozens of more players to the field? Maybe, but that probably wouldn't upset people the same way that it would if you did it in like the NCAA basketball tournaments. It's kind of a meandering thought, but the thing that I'm somewhat optimistic about, Louisa, as you were kind of describing alternatives, is that maybe just because of the weird nature of singles versus doubles and how they require such different skill sets, maybe tennis will be able, or the US Open specifically, will be able to find its way out of such a binary of, like, we have to pander to tennis casuals like me who are more likely to see this if there's bigger names, versus, we actually want the best doubles players in the world to have an opportunity here. Are you reasonably optimistic that they will find a balance that cuts between, quote unquote, making it fair and not leaving too much money, too many viewers on the table?
I am, mostly because I do think there are answers that make so much sense financially as well as in terms of, competitive balance. We're not talking about restricting the field so much. And also there are singles players, especially on the women's side, who do play doubles. So I think that, and they are also on tour together all year. So they do have opportunities to practice together. I think the ideal situation is for players to leave, for Jess Pegula and Jack Draper to leave the tournament friends now, and the next time when they're in, Adelaide or whatever, they practice together. They maybe trade notes. They kind of form an actual kind of like sporting, dialogue. And when this comes around next year, maybe they team up again. And this time they're on a different level. And the whole level of the field is elevated. Because I definitely I'm not saying that this is like watching a sprinter try to run a marathon. There's no good reason why. I mean, Iga is an excellent doubles player. Like she should win that title, And the reason she's not winning is not that she's not good. It's just that they were asking her to do something, that she was not kind of prepared to do. And Casper Ruud too. So I think that there is a way in which we can actually see the whole thing kind of be elevated and also give doubles players their flowers and give them the opportunities that they've earned. I think there's a way out of that binary a little bit. It's one of these things where everybody is sort of beholden to the television contracts, right? Because we just talked about how the money is going up so much. Why is that money going up so much? It's because of these huge TV deals and the gate fees and things like that. But I think that those partners are going to have a lot to say about what happens. I was not a fan of this going in. I was a fan of the event and I was a fan of the outcome. I'm still not a fan of the way it was done, but I am optimistic that there's a way to do this well.
I will pander a bit with our closing question here. Just toss some red meat out there. So the other draws got started on Sunday, and a couple of the American men who were the great hopes won their matches. And Taylor Fritz, who was in the final last year, and Ben Shelton were victorious. And there's a big contingent of American men in the field this year, 23, which is the most since 1997. Of course, is the perennial story about the U.S. Open, who will win the first Grand Slam singles trophy for an American since Andy Roddick way back in 2003. How are you feeling about that this year, given that Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner win every major at this point? And are there any other storylines you're keeping an eye on? I'm not a betting person, but it's hard to say that Sinner and Alcaraz are just they're ahead of the field in a sort of substantial way. Does that mean that one of them can't fall ill with some mysterious viral illness and have to bow out after 5 games? Absolutely not. Doesn't mean that Carlos Alcaraz won't stumble and hurt his hand, or he won't wake up one day and just feel unmotivated because it's Saturday, as he sometimes does, and inexplicably just throw in a stinker. Absolutely. Could Ben Shelton, rise to the occasion? Of course. Taylor Fritz, absolutely. He can beat these guys when he's playing his best.
Why do I feel like there's a but coming?
I wouldn't count on it. I mean, these guys are not going to win every major forever, right? Because it's impossible, right? That's never happened, right? No, I mean, these guys are just so good. And honestly, like, I don't worry about it too much because they're so much fun to watch. I'm not sitting here being like, wow, Taylor Fritz not living up to expectations. No, Taylor Fritz is doing great. Taylor Fritz is like, good on him. He is trying really hard. And maybe, when you try hard enough and you work hard enough and you are that good, you will get your chances someday. And then he's, maybe he would take one. Ben Shelton is a huge server, and sometimes you get hot and, you can do it. He's a better mover than I had ever expected him to be. And, so absolutely they could. I'm not counting on it.
Thanks so much. That's Louisa Thomas. You can find her work at The New Yorker, where she's a staff writer. Louisa, I appreciate you coming on the program this week.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Up next, a crisis in NFL quarterbacking.
New season, new chaos in college football.
Let's go! Big stage, big opportunity.
This Labor Day weekend, the wildness lives on ABC, ESPN, and the all-new ESPN app.
What a way to start!
Featuring top 10 teams like Clemson, Notre Dame, Alabama, and LSU, and Bill Belichick's debut at North Carolina.
It's so special when these teams collide.
Don't miss a lineup filled with electric matchups.
Welcome back to college football.
Kickoff week presented by Modelo. Labor Day weekend on ESPN and ABC. Also available to stream on the all-new ESPN app.
Gatorade is the #1 proven electrolyte blend designed to hydrate better than water. So you can lose more sweat and raise your game. Gatorade, is it in you?
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
The NFL season starts next week, and the Indianapolis Colts are going to start Daniel Jones, noted bad quarterback who needs little other introduction. Jones is 28 and going nowhere, but the Colts selected him to start over Anthony Richardson, the number 4 overall pick, just 2.5 years ago, who missed most of his first season with an injury and then had a really bad sophomore year in 2024. Richardson infamously took himself out of a game for a play because he was tired, raising all kinds of questions about his commitment to the job. His stats were bad, and he really hasn't looked anything like a quality NFL quarterback yet. But still, Richardson just turned 23. He definitely has more upside than Jones, who we know is bad. Yet the Colts have a head coach, Shane Steichen, and a general manager, Chris Ballard, who might be on the hot seat this year. Probably are. And it's raised some questions, like the following. Are the Colts doing this so that their brass have a slightly better chance of keeping their jobs with a 500-ish season and maybe a wild card round playoff exit, even at the expense of the potential for longer-term contention? Or perhaps, do NFL teams want to develop their own Josh Allens without letting quarterbacks work out the kinks early in their careers, as Allen once did for the Bills? Or is Richardson just really, really bad, and the Colts have already recognized it 2 years into his time with the program? Or, Lindsay, maybe simply this, and I ask this with the understanding that Anthony Richardson could be traded anytime after we record this on Monday. You never know. Do the Colts have a plan?
No, because Daniel Jones is never the plan. I just completely reject the notion of any sort of bigger backroom chess moves yet to come when you've settled on, oh, Daniel Jones is the answer we've been looking for. Daniel Jones will save us. There is a recent history of kind of washed up middle career quarterbacks having some fun second, third acts, such as maybe a Bridgewater or Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, Baker Mayfield. But Daniel Jones has never showed the upside of those players. We've seen no indication that that's what is to come. And really, if you read the stuff from Colts training camp, nobody's like, Daniel Jones has looked spectacular. That is not what's happening. This is a organization that from day one mishandled the Anthony Richardson thing. And they have made declarative statements that they have gone back on within 14 days. They've been wishy-washy. And look, I think Anthony Richardson absolutely deserves blame in this. He has not had a flawless start to his NFL career. But I think it's just malpractice the way that they did this from the beginning. This was a guy who, I think he'd only started 13 games in college. He never completed even 60% of his passes for Florida. He left with eligibility on the table. Nobody thought he was a fully formed product ready to start. There was league-wide acknowledgement that Anthony Richardson was a project. And what did the Colts do? They threw him into the starting lineup in day one. And that has backfired. Their wishy-washiness, his second season when they benched him and then went right back to him 2 weeks later. They benched him, said he needs to sit for this development. 2 weeks later, he was back in the starting lineup. I just think all of this is really bad. Nobody's taking any accountability. And if I was a Colts fan, I would be pretty devastated right now. Not because I feel like Anthony Richardson definitely is the answer. We don't know if he is or not, but just because this all went so poorly that you're never really going to know.
Yeah, and when you don't have a plan, then you end up with too many plans or conflicting plans or a sequence of plans in quick succession, which, as you just said, Lindsay, has been the story. There were clearly concerns about starting him back in 2023, and Chris Ballard, the GM, has said as much, that he regrets caving to the pressure, playing him at that point, but that didn't stop them from then anointing him as the starter going into last year and then giving up on him and then saying Flacco's our guy. And then Flacco loses a couple games in a row and suddenly Richardson's the guy again and he's going to be our franchise quarterback. And so that flip-flopping really doesn't give you much confidence in anything, right? And so even now when they're saying that Jones is the guy, well, who knows really, right? Like how long is the leash really going to be there if he loses a couple games? I mean, that's good news for Richardson, I guess, but you just have to question, as Richardson agent did and said, trust is a big factor, and that is at best questionable right now. And maybe that goes both ways, but you can understand from his perspective and from Richardson's perspective why they just wouldn't have a whole lot of confidence in the Colts actually maintaining a stance. And even if you want to just teach a lesson to a young quarterback and say there are going to be consequences and you're benched and now you're really going to commit to just preparing and studying and doing things on the sidelines to get ready for when it's your time again. But you can't even be confident in that because each time they take him out, they quickly put him back in. So yeah, it does not inspire confidence.
One of the things that I find most interesting about this story, most troubling about this story, is the way that it's macro and goes well beyond the Colts. I did some research last year during the season for Opta Analyst at theanalyst.com, actually on the occasion of Richardson being benched for the first time last year, about the changing timeline on which NFL teams are comfortable taking first-round quarterbacks and benching them. It used to be exceedingly rare for an NFL team to take a quarterback in the first round and then bench him within a year or two for performance reasons and sit him down. Now, there are quarterbacks who did not first get to start right away. And I'm not talking about those quarterbacks, but I'm saying the amount of time from being drafted to not just becoming the starting quarterback, but to being benched for performance reasons. Went back through about a decade of first round picks. And from 2014 through 2017, the only first round pick quarterback to be benched less than 2 seasons into his time with that team was Johnny Manziel, who was drafted 22nd overall in 2014 and was benched 12 weeks into his second year with the Browns. And that was not even entirely performance related, if you remember all of the reporting around that time about the way that Manziel was acting. But Blake Bortles got the better part of 5 years before the Jaguars first benched him after they drafted him. Jameis Winston got 3 seasons and 8 weeks. Marcus Mariota got 4 seasons and 6 weeks. Carson Wentz got 4 seasons and 13 weeks. Mitchell Trubisky, 3 seasons and 3 weeks. But then something happened starting with the 2018 quarterback draft class where guys were getting picked and then quite frequently in less than 2 years, they were getting sat down. Josh Rosen, Dwayne Haskins, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields was an exception, as was Mac Jones. They each got 2 years at least before they got sat down. But Kenny Pickett from the Steelers did not make it 2 seasons. Bryce Young, Lindsay, though he might be back, number 1 overall pick, made it 1 season and 3 weeks. And then Anthony Richardson, 1 season and 9 weeks. NFL teams clearly have decided in the last few years that the leash should be a lot shorter for first-round pick quarterbacks. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing.
Do you think there's any corresponding difference in the willingness to turn the job over to that pick in the first place? That is, if you're more willing to give that job to a quarterback early without some sort of understudy breaking in period, then maybe you would also be quicker on the trigger when it comes to benching them if they don't play well. Do you think that has changed, or is it not that?
I don't think so, because the vast majority of first-round pick rookie quarterbacks now are starting by the end of their first season. I mean, there have been some exceptions to that over the years, but it's a pretty short list. The old Aaron Rodgers path of sit for a year behind Brett Favre and then take over. It might have even been more than a year with Aaron Rodgers. Time flies. It's been so long. But that's pretty rare right now. I mean, even last year, remember, people thought that would be the case with Michael Penix with the Atlanta Falcons because for whatever reason, the Falcons backed up an armored truck full of cash for Kirk Cousins and then drafted Penix weeks after that. And yet, the laws of gravity still took hold, and Penix was the quarterback by the end of the year, and Cousins was a very expensive backup. If I were to take a stab at this, I think it's that teams are just so anxious now, and coaches and executives are so worried about what will happen to them, to themselves, if they get on a negative 2 or 3 year run, that they just think we don't have time for this shit. And so you don't have cases maybe like Josh Allen, who I just mentioned, where quarterback can be kind of bad, kind of iffy for a couple of years before really starting to take off. I'm just not sure that's even allowed now of first round picks, whether Richardson turns out to be terrible or not.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wonder about, I mean, I know these numbers don't completely coincide with like really getting these rookie scale contracts capped, right? But I do wonder how much of it is that like there isn't as much money invested in these rookies, but yet it's so valuable to have a good player on a rookie scale contract. So you really want to throw them out there early, but then because you're not spending as much money on them, if it looks like it's going downhill, you're more willing to bail on it versus if you did have kind of unlimited, you know, if you weren't capped by the rookie scale, someone smarter than me would have to do the exact analysis of that. But it does kind of, I think, play into the mentality. But I also think, I mean, look, you use the Aaron Rodgers example, but we've also had, I mean, both Patrick Mahomes and Jordan Love, who are two of the bigger quarterbacks out there right now, right? Both of them famously didn't start right away either and kind of got to sit behind. So I think there's this fear, there's this narrative being built that what you don't want is for them to develop bad habits right away. You know what I mean? And like that's almost the worst thing that can happen. And I think that's a lot of the fear with the Bryce Young thing last year was, has he been thrown into the fire so much that there's going to be no salvaging him. He's going to have no trade value, and we're not going to be able to develop any further if he just keeps going out there and getting killed every day. So like you mentioned, Bryce got pulled early in his second season. Then Andy Dalton got in a car wreck and Bryce Young had to come back in, and all of a sudden, after sitting out for about a month, showed a lot of growth and ended the season as a pretty solid starting quarterback, and there feels like some future there. I feel like that's such a unique situation though, and the Colts have tried to kind of do something similar, but it's been very inorganic. Like I said, I mean, Bryce Young had to come back in because Andy Dalton got actually injured, you know? Like it was not just brass changed their mind.
Yeah, and one of the things about football is that if that highly touted young quarterback prospect is carrying the clipboard, you can't actually see their progress from afar. It's not like they're playing in the G League or they're some highly touted baseball prospect and you can just look up what they're doing in AA or AAA and you can see that progress. If the quarterback is not playing, then it's basically a black box from the outside. And maybe Anthony Richardson, the biggest improvements he has to make maybe are off the field, arguably, or at least that's what the Colts are suggesting, that he just has to dedicate himself to preparation and studying schemes and fitness and all of these things. And he can do that, and maybe it'll be best for him in the long run to be able to focus on those things. But as a Colts fan, you can't really assess whether he's making strides in those areas until he gets back on the field again. So there's going to be some impatience and frustration in any situation like that. And I guess the good news maybe for Richardson is that he is still so young and inexperienced because he was so young when he started. And as Lindsay mentioned, just the 13 games in college, and he was in this run pass option scheme that wasn't really NFL style to begin with. And then he played 4 games in his rookie season, and then he had the shoulder injury, and then he missed a couple games with injury last year too before the benching. So he just hasn't played that much. It's just not that many snaps in the grand scheme of things. And just just age-wise, he's still really young too. He's the same age as Cam Ward. So that would be the reason for optimism, I guess, is that he hasn't gotten all that many reps and he is still young. So there's still a chance for him to break out. But but probably until Daniel Jones struggles and they slot Richardson back in there, we just won't really know whether he's getting any closer to that goal.
No, we won't. But in the meantime, I suppose we can take a guess at whether the Indianapolis Colts are getting closer to anything other than continued mediocrity or a bottoming out. My guess is no. That's all for this episode. We also have a special bonus show that is in the podcast feeds right now for our treasured Slate Plus members. It's about the new clear-cut best team in the WNBA and probably the league's new best player too. Ahead of the playoffs, we'll check up on Napheesa, Colliers, and the Minnesota Lynx. To hear that, you can subscribe to Slate Plus on Apple Podcasts by clicking Try Free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/hangup+ to get access wherever you listen. The episode is available right now, and we will see you there. Our show notes are at slate.com/hangup, and you can email us at hangup@slate.com. Don't forget to follow the show and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Our producer is Kevin Bendis, and for Ben Lindbergh and Lindsay Gibbs, I'm Alex Kirshner, wishing you a happy football season. Remember Zelmo Beatty, and thanks for listening.